Sometimes people are too keen to knock out potential sales because they don't think people have budgets when they haven't taken the time to really start to understand what the journey of the client is, what's the problem. So actually one of the big things I've really learned is actually to say like, okay, that's fine. Can you tell me why? Because actually once you then get them to open up, it's like, well, I think it was okay, but my boss didn't understand it. It's like, well, we can help with that.
Hey, Adam, welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you here.
Brilliant. Lovely to see you, Harrison, Nick. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Good to have you. That's good. I know we chatted a couple of weeks ago. We had some good ideas. And so we're like, hey, why don't you come on the podcast and chat? So figured it'd be good. So glad you're here. But as you know, we start every conversation the same way. Give us a crazy fun story that's happened in your career.
Yeah, so I had a good think about this, and there's many things, but there's one that really sticks out to me, and I believe it shaped me as an individual. When I was younger, I used to do ski seasons quite a lot, and when I came back in the summers, I used to my parents had pubs and restaurants back in Suffolk, and I used to go and do lots of different hospitality things. And I was working in London for an events company doing this big wedding, and really high profile, and I was there sort of opening champagne cork, which fired out of my hand and then flew across this thing and hit the mother of the bride in the back of the head. I just popped up. Luckily she had like so much like bump in her hair, like I don't think she kind of like looked around and couldn't see it was me, and I just very casually styled it out. So, but then I spent the rest of the evening really nervous. Then consequently, they had a helicopter like come and land to take the bride and groom away afterwards, and we had all our stuff out. And as this helicopter came in towards the end of the evening, it just took all our glasses and everything out from other thing like that. So that's just like any time I ever get in my career when I think things are tough, nothing ever could be as bad as that evening. So that's one thing that's always stuck with me.
That's wild. Coming in and out in a helicopter to a wedding, also power move. Love that.
Yeah, exactly right.
The first thing that stands out, anyone who's a listener to the podcast, right, I've always thought is correlated to extroverts, introverts, which we're going to get into in a bit. But there seems to be a correlation between anybody who's ever been a scientist and had a side gig in some kind of entertainment segment.
Yeah,
where they're on into sales. I ran a mobile cocktail bar. We've had loads of people on there that have been DJs and like event planners. It seems to be like some weird convergence. If you've done both of those things, it's destiny.
I think so. And I think hospitality in general is such a good grounding for sales, especially if you're young in your career, because you get to speak to such a broad demographic of people at all different stages of life, all different, interests and things. And you get to have conversations, which I think is fundamentally the most important thing in sales as well. So it's a really good sort of like role-playing environment, really. So yeah.
The correlation does not work in reverse, I found out though. So you don't go to do event work and find lots of scientists. It doesn't. Right. I know this because I was behind the bar once at like a 50th wedding anniversary. I was surrounded by all of these sort of like just people with non-scientific interest, like sort of people that would follow Love Island and that kind of like just to reference them. And I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, I was like, do you know who that is? And they're like, who are you talking about? I'm like, that's John Gurdon. They're like, and he's like this stem cell professor who's won a Nobel Prize, and I was flipping out. They're like looking for some celebrity.
Nobody knows who you're talking about.
Oh, brilliant.
That's funny. But yeah, I think what would be helpful is kind of thinking back to that. Like, what kind of was that tipping point for you where you said, "Oh, I'm gonna go get into sales"? Like, how did you know that was the right path?
Yeah. So sales has always been something that I've been involved in. So I did skiing, then I had a career in hospitality. I had my own business, worked for big corporates, and there's lots of training in there as well. Then I migrated into recruitment, ran a sort of a 360 desk where you were responsible for the whole aspect. So basically running your own P&L. Then COVID hit, and I was in a position like so many where everything that was standard just got flipped upside down and shaken inside out. And actually I read a book called The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman, sort of LinkedIn fame on there as well. And I thought, I've got to take control of this a little bit. Like, basically the book is actually you treat your career like you would a a business and relook at it things. And I thought, well, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What have I always had, sort of success in? And it is that, I've always been good at selling, but then I've always been told that you weren't the right type of character. You're not a salesman. You're not salesy enough to be that. And I was like, but I've always hit my quotas. I've always delivered really good outs, and my landing rates were always really good. So actually, I, again, through sort of some weird pivots through the company I work in now, sort of found myself in this sort of role within science and tech, selling really complex, capital projects and development to, these are multi-million pound projects. And actually the skills that I've learned along those way, I wouldn't say there's a defining moment where I'm going to be a salesman, but just these experiences have all sort of stacked up and actually giving myself the confidence to say, I can do this. I can sell 3, 4, 10, 15 million pound projects and, feel comfortable standing in the room, talking about it and advising it. And, so that's where it's sort of born, really.
I wonder, you said a term that you weren't salesy enough. What the heck does that even mean? Like, I feel like that would be like a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of, that very alpha male, almost Wolf of Wall Street type character. And I think a lot of people have been in that environment where it's just, focus on getting the dashboard spinning. You got to hustle. You got to do that, cool no matter what, push. And, you lose the value of what is actually good about tracking KPIs, tracking OKRs, your focus when you just try to really slam home to create, in inverted commas, a win. And I was always like, but that's just not me. I've gone out and tried to, I can act and I can do the persona and I can go out and do the networking events and be that kind of, sort of person in the room that everybody pivots to, but it's just exhausting. I find it absolutely exhausting. I sort of coming away from like events and, nights just thinking like almost in tears sometimes because I'm that tired, like mentally. And then I can't really follow up properly on these because I don't really know the character I was when I was in the room with them on there as well. And actually it's more than of an understanding of myself when it comes to sales and stuff. If I'm just genuine, if I go as I am and build some rapport with these, with my prospects, then actually I have much more success in the long term. And it's not always about like going in and coming out with a black book full of closed deals. That's what I mean sort of by salesy, that really, just classic kind of,
Classic Nick is what you were saying. Yeah.
Well, I was about to say, I'm an extrovert, but I wouldn't say classic salesy. Definitely not the alpha male. You and I both bragged the other day that we know how to knit. That's not alpha male.
Can you crochet though? Because that is when you start to get advanced.
Yeah, we both have knitted. We both know how to knit. I did crochet at one point, but knitting was more my style.
What may make me feel more alpha male is I don't call it knitting. I call it 3D printing with textiles because then it's.
I like that. Very cool. Perfect. So yeah, it's utilizing what I know as my strength into it. And again, I'm still a salesman. I'm still looking for a competitive advantage. I still want to help the client deliver a really good product, but also I'm in competition with a lot of people. So it's actually, it's about, meeting the needs of the business as well as the needs of the clients. And, I think those introverted tendencies that kind of analytical thought process, that way you kind of, an introvert will naturally think quite deeply about a problem, can actually lend itself fundamentally really well to the sales process, because every business at some point has to make a sale. Whether you're a startup, whether you're a big established corporate, whether you're anywhere in between, if no one is out there bringing in the top line income, then no one's got a job at the end of the day when you break it down that simply. So actually there's, I think it's an important role, and sometimes it's not, it's kind of classified as a very simple get out there and sell, when it's actually, it's a bit deeper than that.
One thing that you hear a lot about is sales is this like act of pushing whatever it is that you have onto somebody, right? It's like, I'm going to push this product, I'm going to push this, or I'm going to tell them about this stuff that we have. And I think that is a version. I wouldn't even call that like good sales, right? Like in reality, when you're trying to sell, like maybe sales is like the wrong term because it has this like negative connotation. I think the best salespeople are out there trying to legitimately solve problems that, their potential customers have. And hopefully they have the best solution to go and do that, right? And then those two things kind of marry up, and then you end up like working together. And I think that's like, a better way to think about sales versus this like, I've got this thing, I'm going to try and get you to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's two-pronged. It's firstly understanding who you're selling to. So actually, who is your customer? Like, have you identified your ideal customer profile? Like, is that person in the company you're targeting? Is your product suitable for them generally? And then it's to build, authentic trust with that contact, and understanding some point it might not generate in a transaction for you, because that's what a lot of people think of sales. They think of it as like when we sign at the dotted line, but actually it's that wider process. And I think, understanding your products is really key. Like, genuinely know what you're selling, what your value is, like, and then
That's underrated. That's also an underrated skill, because a lot of people and like a lot of sales reps literally don't know their products, and they don't know them well, and they don't know how they can be applied, and they don't know how their customers use them. And so like if you don't know that is like table stakes, is like knowing the product or service that you're offering, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes you lose that when it's salesy, because it becomes about you and your numbers, when actually it should be about your product and your customer, and you're facilitating that relationship between those two entities, really. So it's how you can add sort of real value. But in sales, we're not, it's not charity. It's not, you're not pro bono. You're not there to sort of, there's got to be something in it for you in the most crudest of terms. Exactly. You're adding value. You should be rewarded for that. And being able to kind of really deliver a stellar job for the client and build that trust. And actually, you find that your fee is justified and your value is understood. I think that's really important.
I do think that there's a point there that sort of below the surface of what everyone's saying is that actually we talk about failing fast, we talk about understanding this, because if you're a rep that wants to add value, I think you have more, like a higher number of valuable conversations. And that's because you don't spend a lot of time trying to push something that isn't the right customer. So you go into a room,
absolutely.
I've termed this fail fast, but you go into a room and you talk to people, and Harrison says this quite well on our discovery calls. He normally says to someone, hey, let's have a chat and let's see if this is a good fit for us. And it's not whether we can sell to you, it's whether the relationship works in both ways. Because if we can't service what you need and you don't need what we're trying to sell you, it's just going to end badly. So the quicker you get through those conversations into ones where it is a fit, the better job you can do as a salesperson for your company as well.
Yeah. And I think it's, I've done a series on this on LinkedIn, and like sort of your process over your personality element to it as well. You've got to have good process, good structure. You've got to have a pipeline that you've got to have scorecard metrics behind your pipeline, so you know how a deal progresses in an ideal.
Walk us through that, Imelda. Walk us through that. I don't think enough people know what you're talking about. Like, give us, like, break that down. What does that mean?
So you have a sales pipeline in the top. So the classic, you've got your leads, which is your wider funnel. And as you go through the sales pipeline, you're refining and refining and refining until the deal really suits your process, your product on there as well. And I think a lot of people will, again, being very general here, but a lot of people will look at that top line and it's about, we've got to put as much in at the top as we can all the time. And actually what you want at that top is you want a steady flow of inquiries that you can service and rationalize properly. So you've got to have some initial to your point, Nick, an initial qualification like criteria on there, like which basically rounds, does my product solve a problem? Am I speaking to the right person? Can they afford, in theory, the service that we are providing? And I think you've got to get to those answers pretty quickly. And it doesn't mean if none of those tick boxes, they might not be a customer in the future, but it's actually understanding that on there as well. And as you go through that pipeline, as you start to refine that customer, you start to then look to add value to the wider business to get to your end goal. So, for example, we design and engineer space, so it's the fit out of internal real space. So it's then looking at, what is the science that they are creating? What's the business case around why they're doing it? Like, why their development? Why this company? Why have you formed this startup? And then what we look to do is we look to hook the science of the business case basically up to the physical fabric of the building. So it's actually like, what's your process understanding? What is your requirements? What's your exit strategy? Okay, we can help you on this through, feasibility of buildings, understanding what your requirements are. That's kind of how that works. And I think whatever product you're selling, you've got to understand what's different stages of the journey your customer is on. What are your key criteria? And it's different for every single business. And even if your competitors, it will be different. But it's understanding who you are and what your metrics that sit behind you, so you've always got something to anchor back to in terms of your pipeline to understand your true sort of value that sits in there, really.
Let's take a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have going on over here at Succession. We work with 40 plus life science sales companies to help them find more opportunities and close more deals. We provide a range of services to support your sales growth. So whether it's increasing top of funnel opportunities with done for you lead generation, in-person or virtual sales training reinforced by personalized training plans, recruiting top sales talent, or just building custom AI workflows to help make your team more efficient and focus on selling. So if you're ready to transform your sales strategy, visit succession.bio and schedule a call with Nick and I, and we'll see how we can support you. Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things in there, right? You mentioned a couple, call them like qualification criteria, right? Like, are you talking to the right type of person, or do you have this potential company even have the budget to afford what you're trying to do? Do they have a problem that you can actually solve, right? I mean, I think you mentioned a couple of those in there, and I do think that there is, and I'm curious. So you're the stuff that you guys sell is obviously very expensive, but I see a lot of people all the time talk about budget, and they talk about budget as in like, do they have budget for this? How can I figure out what their budget is? And it's like most purchases, I think nowadays aren't this like super budget driven purchase where they're like, I am allocating this amount of budget for this very specific thing. I think you get like top level companies will like obviously allocate budget for their annual planning, multi-year planning, depending on the size of the company. They allocate those down into different departments who then kind of like allocate their budgets down to different teams and groups and different projects, etc. But I feel like everything is so fluid. It's not like I have X dollars or X pounds that I can spend on this very specific thing. Now, I'm sure people come to you with budgets of some variety of like, hey, I got 15 million pounds that I can spend on this build. But like in reality, that could fluctuate up, down, left, right, who knows? Because it's like budgets are fluid. But I feel like there's this overemphasis in sales across the board of like, do they have budget today? Whereas I almost like to flip it in my head, which is there a big enough problem that like they're willing to solve this problem? Then budget doesn't matter, right? If you can identify the big enough problem, the initiative that is most important to them, they will allocate budget to solve it. And I imagine what you're doing is like probably top 3 initiatives that the company's going through. So you're probably always aligned in that top problem, right?
Yeah, I agree with you on this budget question. I think for me, it's a question of sort of your value proposition, really. Do they understand the value you bring and the value that sits behind any potential price on there as well? I think as a salesperson, that's your job to make sure that the client really truly understands your value, what it is you bring, why your fee is your fee, the price is the price, the benefits that product has, and how it could potentially assist that company. Whether that then turns into a transaction and a close, that might be, we don't know that, but it's your job to make sure that you put yourself in the best possible position and identify and then truly look to help the client on that as well. And I think you're absolutely right. The companies, as a general rule, will spend money on services and products that will help them with their long-term vision and goals, and then they see a return on that investment on there as well. So it's it's fundamentally important. It's quite tricky, and I think sometimes people are too keen to knock out potential sales because they don't think people have budgets, when they haven't taken the time to really start to understand what the journey of the client is, what's the problem. Again, we look at different things where you have budgets on there as well. There's bits where you're taking a build. You can lease a lot of the project build that a lot of people know about. So, you put like an office into your thing, you can lease all that furniture against the time of your lease. You're not purchasing it. You can turn a lot of the big expenditure into an OPEX cost rather than the CAPEX cost. It's just, it takes time to really understand the mechanics and how that deal's particularly structured. If I go to you and said, oh, you guys want a new lab facility is going to be, I don't know, 1.8 million quid to get that done. Like, sign on here and we'll go and build it. You're going to go, actually, that's a massive chunk of money for any company about to do that. If you're saying that actually we need to look at the feasibility of the particular building, there's an initial fee here, which is less than 0.3% of your potential project build, but that will give you the confidence that you are going in the right direction and this is going to work for you and give you a North Star. And actually it's going to save you 3 months. Then actually that's a really good step to get them onto that journey and then move it through. So
hearing you talk, we're talking from the rep perspective and what the rep needs to do, like the boots on the ground talking to the client. I think there's a lot of onus on the sales leaders to support them in able to follow out this process, find out that information, triage through the pipeline. Because I've worked for great leaders and not so great ones, right? And often people are like, okay, so you had one call about this $1.8 million project. Tell me absolutely everything the company needs, when it's going to close, why it will close, and who's signing the deal. Like, you've had a 10-minute call with somebody as a discovery, and now you're being pressured to drive it through. And I think that doesn't allow reps the space to build that knowledge and that understanding.
Yeah, for something that's like that expensive, like knowing the date that is going to close is absurd. That's just like wild after one. I mean, maybe they have a hard deadline, but in reality, there's no way that in reality, those deadlines are going to get hit, right? Like, it's just crazy.
But depending on the level you're speaking at, 28 hours can be a lot of money to be able to think. So they're thinking about it in the same way as the person you're speaking to. It really, what level you're at and the cost as well.
It is, and actually, you're absolutely right, and it's against the different elements of it. We know lab builds are expensive, so people will hear say like million, six, 7-figure sums, and go, that's okay. That's not, that's about what we're thinking of. Could be a piece of equipment or some reagents or something like that. There's hundreds of pounds, and they go, wow, no, that's ridiculously expensive. No, I'm not interested in that at all. Like, and it's like, but this is, a tiny amount to that. It's all about perception, perspective, and how you then set the deal up and how you sort of migrate that client through. I think it's,
I mean, the concept of expensive is all subjective, right? It's expensive compared to what? It's expensive compared to like what you thought it was going to be. It's expensive compared to the value you think you will get from it. It's expensive compared to the ROI. It's expensive compared to a competitor. It's expensive compared to doing nothing, right? Expensive is just like is a subjective term. And I think a lot of reps will hear, oh, that's expensive, and they immediately start to try to justify like a price that they threw out there, rather than trying to understand what do they mean behind like something being expensive.
It's one of the big things I've kind of lent into in search for tendency around this is the power of silence in these conversations. So actually, one of the big things I've really learned is actually to get comfortable in that silence. So off the back of that question is then to say, like, okay, that's fine. I know it's something. Can you tell me why? Don't try and fill the space. Let that and get comfortable and let them explore. Because actually, once you then get them to open up, it's like, well, I think it was okay, but my boss didn't understand it. It's like, well, we can help with that.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't really understand it like that. And then you kind of dig deeper into what actually is causing the pain. Like, one of the things I always try and do, and getting my clients listening, this is what I do. I'm trying to find out what keeps you up at night. Like, what is it that within your company, when you get home and you get out of your car, you get in the door, that's the last thing that's on your head, thinking, oh, I'd like to get that because I want to try and help with that in terms of a building thing. And, sometimes we speak to companies of all different ranges, and it might be that the science isn't going the way they want it to go. They're having a massive issue with recruitment. They can't find the talent. And like, might know somebody who can help with that and introduce some people actually to relieve a bit of pressure on those to help you get this, get things moving. And I think all salespeople, no matter what you're selling, if you're selling pencils or you're selling huge lab buildings, I think if you can provide that extra support, if you can get, onto a trusted kind of one-to-one kind of relationship with your client and genuinely look to understand what they're like, what their whole makeup of the company is, what their culture is, what their vision, their values are, you've got so much more ability to actually find the right solution for them. If you've got the right solution, like you said, Harrison, price doesn't really then become a factor because they trust you, they trust the product, they know it, they can see the return on it, hopefully, and then hopefully you can then close that deal.
I had a question for you. How did you get comfortable throwing out pricing in the millions? Because I'm sure there's plenty of people here that they just like the thought of saying that, hey, this thing is going to cost £7 million probably scares shit out of them. So how do you get comfortable throwing out those types of numbers and negotiating? I'm sure like you're negotiating over hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is like some reps' quotas are like what you're negotiating over.
You got to understand who's on the other side of the table. So you got to really acknowledge the experience and actually, are they used to hearing these type of numbers?
Yeah,
I think if it's within a startup where I get, if you're founding a company, a startup, you've all of a sudden got 101 different things coming in. For me, it's about managing expectations as early on as you can be on there as well. So it's breaking everything down into small chunks. To you get like I get an initial brief. I will sort of say, okay, whoa, okay, let's just pause here a second, because we're looking at and you give it a range between X and X. So is that what you're expecting? Are you comfortable with that? And they're like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting. But let me just explain why it is what it is at that point. And you start to build it all in sort of step by step. It helps the client start to understand what the value of the product is, but also helps you as a salesperson to understand what the client is looking for at that point, because again, it might be that they've got a perception, I need X, but they don't, they need Y, and Y is actually 5 times cheaper than X, but it will help them for 2 years. And then when they get to that point, hit that milestone, then they can then move on to that piece there. So it is, but sometimes, I think for sales, you've got to be honest. And if it's going to be X, you got to tell them. You've got to, it's one thing I really hate in sales is when people try and circumvent the conversation because they're nervous about the answer. Yeah, try as they don't want to tell the hard truth.
They don't want to hear no.
Yeah, and because you're worried about losing the deal because it's potentially a really big deal and this is going to be brilliant for me. But I don't want to tell them that in case they say no. And it's actually, no's not the end of the deal. No's not the end of the sale. No's just an opportunity to visit and understand.
No is where the deal start.
Yeah, you've not started selling until you hear your first no.
Exactly.
There's one thing you're saying about the price and things, and just as a general tidbit, I've come across with different reps, and I think that you need to, is that often we're used to being told things are expensive because that's a great negotiation tactic for anybody. And then you'll see reps that hear this so much, they'd start saying internally, oh, we're too expensive, I can't sell this. So then they go out, and when you watch people that have that mindset go present the price, they don't present it like, oh yeah, so it's just so-and-so. Like it's worth the money. They present it like, yeah, so the price is, it's going to be around, probably, and then they give you a number. And whether that number's £10 or 10 million, it now sounds expensive because you presented it in a bit cautious kind of way. And I think confidence in presentation of any figure is one of the keys.
Yeah. And they start negotiating with themselves right away too. They're like, oh yeah, it's probably going to be like around 10K. Well, hey, we have academic pricing, or hey, but I can like maybe do something by the end of the quarter, by the end of the month, and we can be flexible. It's like,
and I think it comes down to this bit where there's confidence in your pipeline and your metrics that sit behind your pipeline. Are you actually speaking to the decision maker? Or are you speaking to the person that signs the check? Because if you're not, you need to. Now they might be detached from it, but you've got to have that conversation with them to understand if they're going to sign it. Because if they just, you do all the work with a team and it's great, and you've done workshops and you put together an amazing proposal and you're really proud of it and you think this is going to land, guys, and it goes through and then it goes up to board and then it comes back and says, board said no. And it's like, well, why? It's because board didn't understand all the work that went into it. They're just looking at it with due diligence on those, things like I don't see the value of this. This guy said he could do it for free, or they said they could do it on paper. It looks the same. What they haven't seen is all that work you've done with them and understood it. So you've got to really understand the decision-making tree. You've got to understand what the need is. And you've got to, have those conversations and speak to people. I think a lot of salespeople will rely on email, rely on texting, anything like that. All really important, and definitely in early prospecting and efficiency, it's good. But please pick up the phone and have a conversation. Go and have a coffee. Have that human to human interaction, because from there you will really start to understand what makes that person, that company tick, and you'll find the right solution for them.
I think the other piece that's really interesting that you kind of hinted at is there's pretty much always a presentation internally that you're not at, which is the person that wants to buy something from you is like, okay, or wants to work with you, whatever, right? They are most likely presenting to somebody else that says, hey, here's my rationale, here's my reasoning for why I want to buy this thing or why I want to work with this company, whatever it is. You are not, as a salesperson, often in that room. And what I think we underestimate is how good our internal champions are at selling for us or at selling internally, or that they know how to actually sell internally, or that they've even done it before, right? You assume we've got this champion, they're going to go and like vouch for us. We assume that they know what to do. When in reality, oftentimes we're also selling to scientists, right? And so like scientists didn't learn how to sell. They don't sell all day. They don't talk about your solution all day. And so I think there's this like really unique opportunity for sales reps to teach their customer, the prospect, how to sell on your behalf when you can't be in the room. You literally get on a call with them. Hey, you're about to go into that meeting or whatever. Like, hey, how about we chat like the day before, 30 minutes before, like, let's do a dry run. I'm happy to help walk you through it. I'm happy to coach you. We could talk about like, I'll help you build out the business case, like help them actually help you so that they're prepared for the objections they're ultimately going to get from who they're presenting to, right?
I think that's so important. And one of the things, just to add to that, one of the things I advise people don't do is just when you've got a proposal, just whacking that over by email and saying, here's your proposal.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think. Book a call.
Especially if it's a custom proposals, right? If it's standard pricing, it's probably okay. But if it's like a custom proposal, like there's no way to do that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even if it's standard, pick up the phone afterwards and just say, look, does this make sense? I would say walk them through, let them really understand, give them the chance to ask questions. Like, say, is there anything on here that's not making sense or you weren't expecting, they just need tweaking. So
the other thing I think is really good on you may appreciate this as doing recruitment in the past, right? So whenever I've gone for a job interview or something with a recruiter back in the day, the recruiter would say, ring me afterwards. How did it go? Was there anything you wish you said, but that you didn't, or anything that came up that was tricky that you think you'd have answered differently as you left the room? And then the recruiter will go and vouch for you on that behalf, right? If it happened. You can do that with your clients as well. How did the meeting go? Anything come up that we didn't cover, blah, blah, and you can then try and backfill that before they even get to their decision, because there's going to be a gap between that meeting and their final decision process. And they may have said, oh yeah, well, you weren't the chosen provider because of X. And you're like, well, you've misunderstood me. We do exactly X, right? Could that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I guess you don't want to be misrepresented, do you? That's the kind of the key element on it as well. And I think it's so key to, when you're getting towards that bottom of the pipeline, when you're kind of getting towards that close, that's when you have to do the real hard yards. That's when you have to, make sure you're front and center, but also be respectful. You're not the most important thing in that company's day to day. You're just one small element of it. So actually make your communication as frictionless as possible. Understand their different routines. Don't start calling them when they're in meetings on there as well. Just try and find a way that I don't know, it's hard to explain, isn't it? You've got to use a bit of gut feel. And I think a lot of salespeople lose that a little bit because they think, oh, I don't know, quite right, but I've been told I need to do this or I need to have that metric. And actually it's, your client, you've done all the work, you're understanding what the requirement is, your product, there's a good match. Like, what to do next. Just don't try and overthink it sometimes. And I think with an introverted type of character, there's a tendency to overthink because you think, oh, what if they say this? What if they say that? What if they do the other type thing? And actually, sometimes you just got to go and have the conversation and understand what the requirement is. So,
I know we're coming out on time, but just because you said it, we didn't really touch on that point, which is a sort of part of you, that your introverted side of things and how you've used that to your advantage, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask as the roundup, which is like, hey, give us something that, an introvert who, may not feel may not feel at home in sales at the moment. That's something to take away, kind of get confidence in themselves, sort of to be themselves.
I do a lot of, I guess, kind of conversations with people who come and ask me this, actually. So one of the interesting things from LinkedIn and the engagement, I'll often get, a DM or somebody saying, like, asking me those same things, like, what do I do on here? And one of the big things around it is networking. That's always a real common. When I can't network, I don't know how to network, I get overwhelmed. And actually, it's true, I get it. What you need to understand is that everybody pretty much in that room, whether you're introverted or extroverted, is probably feeling the same way. It's really quite an unnatural thing to put a load of strangers in a room together and get them all to talk and and understand. If you're more extroverted, you probably get more energy after that. You get going, you think, oh, this is good, I'm really enjoying this. Nick, you're probably there going, no, brilliant, like the next one, bring more on.
I'm trying to give people back. Why are you leaving? Stay with me.
Exactly. And then from the time you get to the end of that event, we would come out of that event and you'd be like, right, let's go and crack on and, see how we can maximize this. I'm like, you know what, mate, I'm done. Like I need to put my headphones on, listen to a podcast, get on the tube. And I just, I need to recharge. And I think for introvert, don't be scared about having conversations, but look after your energy. Like, prepare, try and find some conversations you can have before you go to an event. So try and see who's going. So set up some one-to-one conversations to make yourself feel comfortable. Take a deep breath, be aware of your surroundings. And, after the event, you don't have to follow up straight away. Just, look after yourself, take time to relax and recharge. And tomorrow's a new day. So that's kind of my biggest thing for an introvert, I guess. And the other thing is just have conversations, like, speak to people. It's really hard, but there's a difference between being shy and anxious and being introverted. And sometimes society will label you as quiet and closed because you're introverted, when actually it doesn't mean you're shy. It doesn't mean you're anxious. It just means that your brain chemistry is made up slightly differently and you need a bit of time to decompress after having conversations and interactions. So, you're doing fine, but, look after yourself on the end of it.
As a typical extrovert, I'm going to try and tell introverts how they should behave. But what I would say is, one thing, I'm an extrovert and I love those conversations. I love being in those rooms. So I can't tell you how to get over that. What I can tell you is the most uncomfortable conversations I have with people is nothing to do whether they're introverted, extroverted, talkative. It's when I can feel somebody's not sincere, not authentic. Yeah. So if you're an introvert trying to be something you're not, that's probably going to come across differently to me than being an introvert in that conversation. So my recommendation would be authentic.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And I think that's a lot of mistakes people who are that more introverted character make, because they feel they have to be, oh yeah, no, this is great. And you don't feel comfortable, and sales is about comfort, isn't it? It's like, yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your insights with everybody. And hopefully there are some salespeople out there, so maybe some founders that are listening that maybe feel a little more introverted and maybe they feel a little better after this. But where can people find you if they have questions and want to chat with you more about this?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is always a really good spot for on there as well. So it's shown notes, but it's just Adam Pead, my LinkedIn profile, known as the introverted sales guy, is what it goes on there as well. So really happy to connect with people on there, and always happy to have a sort of 10-15 minute virtual call if anybody wants to sort of understand, or just hear somebody that's had that experience and sort of got through it. So they can do that. I've got a newsletter which I run as well, which people can sign up to, and I put a few tips sort of ad hoc through there on that as well. So that's always a good place to find me.
Great. We'll throw those in the description for everybody too.
I lovely. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
No, amazing.